I pressed harder on the accelerator, trying to drown out Lisa's endless nagging. God, could the woman never shut up? My friends, my family, the house I lived in, the car I drove, and now, of course, I was driving too fast. God, how I hated her. To make it worse, she always smelled like smoke, and I had a feeling she was sleeping with one of my friends. I would have left a long time ago had that been an option, but it wasn't. Problem was that at one time I had loved her, and in the process foolishly disclosed that a great deal of the wealth I had managed to amass over the years was not exactly obtained legally, and the statute of limitations had yet to run out. She could destroy me, and promised to do so if I ever left her. At first I wondered why she didn't leave herself. Clearly she wasn't happy with me. Then I realized it was because she had me by the balls and knew she could make me do anything she wanted. She enjoyed torturing me. I had to do something permanent to end her control over me. That was why we were on this twisting country back road, far from where we were likely to run across anyone else. Of course, she had no idea what I had planned. As far as she knew, I was taking her to a hot new restaurant buried deep in the Louisiana swamps. At first she was skeptical. Why would anyone build a restaurant out in the swamps? But I explained that it was the best way for the chef to ensure that he always had the freshest seafood. And besides, the remote location was part of the charm. When we had driven far enough that I was reasonably sure we were unlikely to encounter anyone, I pulled over to the side of the road near the bank of a little bayou, where large live oak and cypress trees draped a Spanish moss through a dark canopy up across the road. There were rumors about this area, dark rumors of satanic cults performing rituals in the woods around here, and even further back of voodoo ceremonies practiced by former slaves. "What are you doing?" Lisa demanded. "Shh! Don't shush me," she replied. "No, I thought I heard something." I killed the engine and got out of the car, popping the hood as if I needed to check the engine. I raised the hood, effectively blocking me from her line of sight, and I carefully drew a large, lock-bladed knife I had slipped into my pants pocket before leaving the house. I'd never killed anyone before and wasn't really looking forward to doing it, but she had really left me no other choice. I couldn't leave her and risk her having her rat me out, but I couldn't continue to go on this way either. She would drive me insane, or maybe she already had. "Hey, can you come here for a second?" I called out. I heard her sigh heavily, and for a moment thought she might refuse. Then I heard the sound of the car door opening. "What the?" she complained, rounding the front fender. She never got a chance to complete the sentence. As soon as her face came into view, I swung the knife instinctively at her throat in a slashing motion, but aimed too high, catching her instead with a glancing blow across the right eye, and also digging into the soft flesh on the lower right side of her face as the knife traveled downward. She screeched in pain and instantly put her hands up to her face, trying to staunch the flow of blood. I realized too late how stupid I had been, but it had been a reflex action more than anything else. The quickest and most effective method would have been to wait a fraction of a second longer to ensure that I had a clear shot at the neck, but now she was thrashing around, making the coup de grace that much more difficult. My second swing was on target, opening up a large, deep cut across her throat, from which blood instantly began to pour. I had to jump out of the way to avoid being splashed with the crimson fluid as she pitched forward, gurgling obscenely, dropping first to her knees, then flopping face forward onto the pavement. I stood motionless for what seemed like a long time, but was probably in reality only a few seconds. I half expected her to get up and start nagging at me again, but judging from the massive pool of blood rapidly expanding from beneath her immobile form, she was quite dead. Hiding her body was a simple matter, given our location. I needed only to drag her a few feet into the trees and heave her corpse into the muddy black water of the bayou. It was possible that the massive amount of blood remaining on the pavement might attract the attention of a passing car or truck, although it could be a long time before one came along. It didn't matter, though. By that time the body would have been carried far downstream and become food for all manner of marine life, and perhaps for alligator and nutria as well. Her presence wouldn't be missed around town either. Her parents were both dead, cancer, and her only other family, a brother out in California, hadn't been in contact with her with years. Apparently he couldn't stand her either. I drove back home strangely devoid of emotion. I felt that I should have felt something: elation, sorrow, fear, something. The only thing I could identify was a sense of detachment, as if I was watching my life from outside of myself. Perhaps it was a natural reaction. I wasn't a violent person by nature and just committed the ultimate act of violence. I pulled into the detached car part of my little house. Lisa had always hated this house and complained that I could afford better. I could, but why would I? I was happy with my little two-room bungalow, and it suited my purpose for now. Once I was free of the responsibility of owning and running my own business, which I hope to sell in a couple of years, I could take all my wealth, buy a boat, and sail around the world. No sense in keeping a grand house with all that entailed if I was only going to have to sell it, downsize a few years later. Now that was peculiar. I was sure I'd locked the door before I left, but now it was cracked open and a long, narrow triangle of light streamed out onto the back lawn. My first thought was that someone had broken in and maybe was still inside. Had this been any other night, I would have called the police, but given the fact that I had just committed cold-blooded murder, I did not want any unnecessary contact with law enforcement. It was best to lay low and stay completely off their radar for the time being. I removed the knife from my pocket again, flipping the blade open and approaching the house with extreme caution. I had no way of knowing if the person or persons who had broken into my house were still there, but the safe thing to do was to assume they were until proven different. The knife wasn't going to do much to protect me if the burglar or whoever was in my house had a gun, but it did make me feel a bit safer. As I neared the door, I tried to peer inside through the narrow opening to see if I could see anyone inside moving about. There didn't seem to be anyone in the den area, although I had no way of knowing if someone was waiting just inside the door with his back pressed against the wall. If that was the case, I was a goner. I mounted the steps and peered inside, and since I didn't see anyone, opened the door and stepped inside. Nothing appeared to be amiss in the back den of the kitchen, which I could see into. No missing items, no open drawers, nothing tossed about. I stood still and, hearing no movement, breathed a sigh of relief. I'd still have to check the other rooms to make sure no one was lurking quietly about, but I was beginning to think my fears had been misplaced. I walked through the kitchen and small dining room, noting that everything seemed to be in place, then turned the corner into the living room. I nearly had a heart attack, letting out an audible gasp when I saw her sitting on the sofa. Lisa sat there smoking a cigarette, one sightless eye hanging halfway out of its bloodied socket, the left corner of her mouth split open and drawn into a perpetual frown. An ugly black line dissected her neck, and the front of the blouse she was wearing was stained crimson. The rest of her clothing, while dry, looked like it had been recently washed in muddy water. "Hello, John." I was horrified to the point of speechlessness. She couldn't be here. This thing couldn't be real. "What's wrong, John? Cat got your tongue?" When you're trying to kill your girlfriend, it's best not to do it in a place where voodoo rituals were performed in the past. It's sort of sacred ground for them, not unlike a Catholic cemetery. Funny thing about voodoo. Do you know much about voodoo, John? Of course not. Funny thing is, people who believe in voodoo don't actually think their friends and relatives who had died are actually dead. No, it's more like they've crossed over to another plane. But they're still here, all around us. I must admit, if I didn't know what I know now, I would think it was bullshit too. But here I am. "But you..." I stammered. She actually laughed out loud at my confusion and distress. "Oh, John, you always manage to amuse me. Actually, I'm quite proud of you. Who would have imagined you would ever have the balls to actually kill me? I always thought you were a spineless little toad. Still, I can't allow such things to go unpunished. Remember, John, I always told you that if you tried to leave me, that I would destroy you. I admit I always thought it would be in some other way, like revealing your illegal activities to the cops or turning your own business associates against you by telling them some lie about your double-crossing them. That would be fun to watch. Now I'm limited to physical means. You think that'd be harder now that I'm dead, she said, rising from the couch. But actually I found it's quite the opposite. With surprising speed and strength, she grabbed me by the throat and lifted me clean off the ground, slamming my back into the wall as I grunted in pain at the impact. My knife clattered to the floor. In addition to being incredibly strong, she said calmly, displaying no exertion at all from holding my struggling body against the wall, you can't kill me because I'm already dead. She let me drop to the floor and I attempted to scuttle away, but she wasn't going to have that. Oh, John, we're not through playing yet, she purred, grabbing me by the leg and pulling me back toward her. I fought wildly against her, but it was no use. She was just too strong. Wait, I pleaded. I'm sorry. I'll do anything you want. Anything. Oh, I wouldn't dream of taking advantage of you, John, especially seeing as how you're at such a disadvantage. No, I fully intend to repay you for all you've done for me. She continued to hold on to me with one hand while reaching for the knife with her free hand. You know, you really should thank me. If I had any sense at all, I'd make you suffer. Maybe just horribly disfigure you as you did to me, or slice your hamstring so you'll walk with a limp for the rest of your life. But I'm just not that type of person. I really believe in causing a person as little pain as possible. Besides, John, I love you. With that, she knelt on my chest, pinning me to the floor, thrusting the blade of the knife I had used earlier to end her life deep into my chest. Surprisingly, the pain wasn't as bad as I expected, sort of like taking a blow in the chest in a fight, more stunning than excruciating. I could feel the blade as it entered and almost picture it slicing through the vital arteries leading to my heart. I could have lifted my head to look down at the injury the knife had inflicted, but the warm wetness soaking into my shirt told me all I needed to know. I knew then that there was no feeling quite so helpless as knowing that you were dying and yet unable to do anything about it. Then Lisa lowered her mangled face to mine. I expected to see some sign of sympathy or loss in her one good eye, but found none there, only a soulless blackness, completely lacking in any humanity. Good night, my love, she cooed with a wicked smile. My last memory was the cold darkness descending upon me from above.